And the evidence is there at an individual, cultural, state level, and global level, why states are not as prepared as we should be, why the response has been lacking of humanity, probably not only from the state, but from all of us, or from some other key actors that had some power, and also what is the real institutions that exist to really respond to these normal, ongoing, historic phenomena of mobility, inclusion, and language appearing and disappearing. One big, very provocative is the nation state. We can also ask the same for school, probably. If you would do the timing for the schools, schools exist 250 years ago, as we know today. So what kind of school, what kind of government, what kind of partnership, what kind of state is that exists in order to really fit for purpose and knowing that this is a reality? The good news is that after this session, there will be deep dives, and many of these questions can be discussed there, because it is what it is this conference about. The other good news is that we still have 10 to 15 minutes for some questions. So here is a request for you. I would like to give priority to those who didn't had opportunity yesterday to ask some questions. I also would like to try to get a gender balance in the questions. So please, if anyone would like to share some thoughts or some questions for the two presentations, please raise your hand. And if you don't mind, I would like to invite the two speakers to join me here in the forum. If this is okay with all of you. Any question? Please, just come to the mic and introduce yourself.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Cliff Myers. I have a question for Nat Bunrun, His Excellency. ASEAN has done a lot to promote a universal language of English across the ASEAN community. Is ASEAN going to do anything to promote mother tongue-based education or the use of mother tongue instruction as a means of promoting equity and reducing disparity? Any movement in that direction? Because there was a really exciting movement towards English. I'm curious if any other actions are taking place.
Thank you, Cliff. Please.
Good morning. I have a very small queries.
Maybe introducing yourself.
I'm Professor Dr. Dandaj Regmi from Nepal.
Thank you.
Okay. In the last presentations, our forefathers, mothers, 120 years ago, okay? But our forefathers, 60,000 years ago, why do we have such, gap in between 60,000 father and 120,000 years ago mother?
Thank you.
Okay.
This is gender in the data mining is a question that we may want to go back. Probably another question, please, and two questions, please. Please. Yes. Just come to the mic, or...
Sheldon Schaefer. I'm not helping much with gender balance, but that's going to be fixed.
Thank you, Sheldon.
A question for the second speaker. Yesterday, two things happened that draw into question your optimistic slide about increasing globalization. We had the continuing fiasco of Brexit, and we had also President Trump announcing at the UN that the future belongs to patriots and not to globalists, and that national sovereignty was more important than international collaboration. I wonder if you could comment on whether, is this a cycle? Is it cyclical? Is it a trend for the future? And if so, what are the implications for language? One could argue that globalization will promote global languages, nationalism will promote national languages, neither of which will promote mother tongues. I wonder how you feel about that.
So, final question from this round, if you agree with me, colleagues.
So my name's Misty Andonio, giving the slight gender balance to the proceedings. But he just stole my question. I had exactly the same question Donald Trump announced last night, that globalists will not triumph, he said. So I share the same question.
Could you just repeat your question?
So the question is exactly the same as what the previous speaker, the previous question asked, when Donald Trump actually said, globalists will not triumph, were his words.
Thank you. So one question about ASEAN policies around language, English language, and if there will be some mother tongue leadership around the mother tongue. One question about data on gender with the DNA, and one about around nationalism, patriotism versus globalism, which de facto it's part of the questions about institutions and vision. Dr. Nat, would you like to start probably?
Thank you, Mark, for a very kind question. I try to respond to the first question related to what about English and mother tongue. Before we try to embark on the implementation of multilingual education in Cambodia, in the spirit of education for all, in the framework of Dhaka Framework for Action 2000, we're talking about reaching the unreached. The first we try to identify. If we want to reach the unreached, and we try to identify what about the main barrier and the main obstacle that hard to reach. So 7 target group to be identified. The first one, that means poverty for any country, even developed country. Talking about poverty. And the second one, disability. And the third one, we're talking about ethnic minority or indigenous people. When we're talking about indigenous people or ethnic minority, the most important one, that means language barrier. And the fourth one, related to conflict or natural human disaster, that we're talking about displaced people, civil war, migrant. And the fifth one, we're talking about gender issue, male, female. And the last but not least, we're talking about HIV/AIDS. Affected. But in case of Cambodia, when we're talking about conflict, we're talking about fighting. Now we are on the situation of rehabilitation, rebuild the country after, you see, the Khmer Rouge collapse. We build a country from zero. So now we try to keep peace. So in my presentation, and also in my minister remarks, we cannot achieve, because now EFA in the framework of MDG, we are in the unfinished task. Now moving from Jomtien 1990 to Dhaka 2000, moving to Incheon, South Korea 2015, but unfinished job. Why? Because the main barrier we try to identify in case of Cambodia, that ethnic minority. SDG cannot achieve without conducting multilingual education, mother tongue based. This is my response to the first question. The first one, we try to focus on mother tongue based multilingual education. But in case of Cambodia, is not the serious. Why? Because almost Khmer language as a national language, almost homogeneous, 90%, but the very small part. But as I mentioned earlier, SDG 4 by 2030 cannot achieve if we neglect our indigenous people. And the most important one, that language barrier. That's why we focus on mother tongue-based multilingual education. And moving what we call mother tongue multilingual education, this the bridge from preschool and primary school, grade 1 to grade 3 as the bridge, and after that integrate into the national language. But what about English? Because when we're talking about ASEAN country, English is official language, or we call second language. But the first language is mother tongue. But in case of Cambodia, we try to, integrate as the bridging program of our indigenous people to be the national language, that means Khmer language, to be the common language, because we are under the same umbrella. That's why we try to integrate into the national language. English look like a second language. But in case of Cambodia, not only English, French. Why? Because Cambodia is the former colonialism of France. We still have used French in Cambodia. During my time, that meant French. Now I move from French to English, and I try to practice my English with you. So multilingual education, you see, not only English. In case of Cambodia, we use both English and French. And you see, even in Laos, PDR, and Vietnam, almost we call bilingual. That means some Khmer and French, Khmer English as second language. But up to the higher education institution, maybe, you see, not only English or French, maybe Chinese, Korean, Spanish, and so on and so forth. It's not a conflict, but first to focus on mother tongue. Why? Because the bridge, in order, to overcome the language barrier, not the conflict in terms of English, national language, or mother tongue. This is my response to what question number 1. Thank you.
Thank you. The question from the gentleman from Nepal, I was hoping that nobody would ask me that question. I'm not an expert in DNA. I'm an amateur. I've just been reading about it recently. But I think what has happened is there have been many, many, many people in the past. And it so happens that our shared mother was alive at that particular point, 120,000 years ago, and our common father was alive about 60,000 years ago. There was no relationship between them. And also one interesting thing I learned recently is that from this DNA analysis, it's called ancient DNA, there occurred what's called a bottleneck at around 60,000 or 70,000 years ago, when some catastrophic event occurred and only between 3,000 and 10,000 human beings survived. So all the people who'd been living before that were wiped out, and just this very small number survived. One possible explanation is because of this explosion in the volcano Toba, which nearly wiped out humanity altogether. I can't be clearer than that. That's as much as I understand. For the two questions from this side of the room, we have to be optimistic. I mean, Trump is our cousin as well, unbelievably. He's related to us. And Mr. Johnson. But every family has problem members. If you think back to that clock, how long is Trump here for? Even if he gets a second term, 8 years, it's a fraction of a second in the history of humanity. It doesn't matter. He's going to cause trouble. He is causing trouble. He's making people's lives intolerable. He's having an influence on other people, but he's only here for a fraction of a second. Humanity will carry on. We'll keep on moving. He can't stop us, and we're going to keep on moving. And we have to remember that. Another thing is that we, as activists, as educators, as thinkers, it's part of our responsibility is to pass on information, disseminate information about the sort of thing that we're discussing now, so that Trump doesn't have the only voice. We also have a voice. Thanks.
Thank you so much to both of you. The time is almost over. I just would like to give both of you one minute to, if you want to share with us one idea that you would like us to keep, so that we can go with this idea in our discussions after. Having said this, I would like to put a caveat on this. Yesterday, 14, 16 adolescents went to the Conventions of the Right of the Child Commission and said, you adults are missing the big point, the long-term vision. We have a right of our future, and we want you to respond to that. So we are now here just about to reach 5 years of the new SDGs, 30 years of the Convention of the Right of the Child, and an invitation to be very practical and at the same time have a long-term vision, so that in 30 years more, we will not say, oh, we will have none. So with that kind of urgency and reminder of the adolescents, not of the research, not of the politics, not of UNICEF or any institution, from the adolescents themselves, what would you like to share with the audience so that we keep that in mind for our discussions today and tomorrow?
Thank you. Why we are come here? Because we come here for our children, not only Cambodian children, Thai children, or Lao children. This for our children of our world, for our next generation, for the green world and peace world. And the last but not least, try to commit it for our children of our world. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think what this research, if you can call it research, that I've been doing has made me realize very clearly is that we must pay more attention to and persuade other people to pay more attention to people who are moving around the world but are experiencing immense difficulties, asylum seekers and refugees. As we can see, in the history of humanity, we've always been doing it. So why is it now, only now, since in the last 100 years, maybe, that we've been putting such obstacles in the way of human movement and creating such agony for some of the people who are trying to move around? I think that's what we have to address.
Thank you so much. Thank you for these inspiring final words. I think the session has been very provocative, very inspiring. Thank you to all of you for being on time, for joining us, and looking forward for the next discussion. Please enjoy your break, and thank you again.
Thank you very much for the informative and interesting presentations and for moderating this session. This is a reminder to please submit any questions or comments you have after listening to panels and presentations throughout the conference. Selected questions will be addressed by a panel of experts during the final plenary session. We need more questions, so please do not hesitate. So this is the URL and the QR code. And as I have mentioned yesterday, there will be students filming and asking the speakers for short interviews for their social media content during coffee break and lunchtime. And this Friday, the 27th, there's a film festival celebrating indigenous languages of Colombia, Mexico, and Peru. And here's the slide for more information. We will now have a 25-minute break in the foyer, and the third parallel session will start at 11 a.m. in each room. Please bring your belongings with you and enjoy the morning refreshments.